Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In this video I will be covering inheritance from the A-level biology curriculum. So let's begin. So first, looking at a few key terms that we need to be aware of. So a gene is simply just a section of DNA which codes for a polypeptide or a protein. Then we have the genotype. So genotype is the genetic constitution of an organism. So where we had one gene and we're combining all the gene in our body to form that genotype. And the phenotype is the expression of the genetic constitution and its interaction with the environment. Just learn this definition as how it is. So for example, if we have this purple flower and we know the genotype of this is uppercase B, lowercase b, and then the genotype of that is the uppercase B and lowercase b, and the phenotype would be the expression of that genotype, so the purple color itself. Then looking at alleles, so alleles are just a version of a gene. So for example, looking at these two chromosomes, let's say that these code for a hair color. So in this case we have a uppercase A and a lowercase a. So these two are different, so they are different alleles. But because they're located on the same position on the chromosome, so the same locus, so they will just have the same gene which is coding for the hair color. Alright, so just carrying on with alleles now. So first, looking at a dominant allele. So a dominant allele will always be expressed in the phenotype. So no matter what the genotype is, if we have a single dominant allele, it will always be expressed. So this is represented by a uppercase R. And if we have a recessive allele, so this is only expressed in the phenotype if our genotype is homozygous. And a recessive allele is represented by a lowercase r. Looking at homozygous now, so homozygous is where we have two copies of gene with the same allele. So for example, we could have a capital R, or we could have a lowercase r and a lowercase r. So they are the same allele. Whereas we can also have a heterozygous allele. So we would have two copies of the gene with different alleles. So for example, a uppercase R and a lowercase r. So now just linking this back to our first two definitions. So for a dominant allele, so we could have either the capital R, and the capital R, the lowercase r. It will be expressed. So the only way it won't be expressed is when we have the lowercase r and the lowercase r. Whereas for the recessive allele, we would have to have homozygous alleles for it to be expressed. So the only way it can be expressed is by having both lowercase r, lowercase r. So just looking at a monohybrid cross, so this might just be a recap from GCSE. So looking at an example, so we've been told that red flowers are dominant to yellow flowers. So what we can start to do is we can start to look at the genotypes of each. So we've been told that red flowers are dominant to yellow flowers. So what I can see is that for a red flower, I would require either a capital R, or I could have a capital R and a lowercase r, because remember, dominant will be always expressed in the genotype. So I could have a heterozygous and it would still be expressed. But whereas for a yellow flower in this case, we would have to have both recessive alleles for it to be expressed. So in that case, that would be a lowercase r and a lowercase r for a yellow flower. So it's asking me what offspring phenotypes would be expected from a heterozygous red flower and a yellow flower. So what I can do is I can start to write the genotypes down. So it's told me that the red flower has the genotype which is heterozygous. So I know heterozygous would be different alleles. So it'd be a capital R and a lowercase r, because we can't have both capital R's, because that would be a homozygous dominant. And then looking at a yellow flower, so I know the only option I can have a yellow flower is by having both recessive, so that would be both lowercase r. So to cross them, what we do is we basically split the alleles for both of them. So in that case, for the heterozygous red flower, I would have uppercase R and a lowercase r, and for a yellow flower I would have R, a lowercase r and a lowercase r again. So I've just drawn this kind of grid here. So this is my grid. So what I can now do is I can simply just join them together. So for the first example, it would just be a uppercase R and a lowercase r. Then I would have a lowercase r, then uppercase R, lowercase r again, and a lowercase r and a lowercase r again. So it's asked me for the phenotypes. So in this case, just looking at the genotypes first. So I have a uppercase R and a lowercase r and a lowercase r and a lowercase r. So these are the only genotypes I have. So now just looking at the probabilities of them occurring, what I can see is both of them occur twice. So the probabilities is basically 50%, 50%, or 0.5, 0.5, and the ratio is just 1 to 1. So I'm just going to write 50% for both of them. Now, because it's asked me for the offspring phenotype, so I can say is that one is red because we have a capital R in there, so that will be expressed, and we also have yellow because we have two lowercase r's, and so the yellow will be expressed in that case. So what we can just say that in this case the red has 50% chance and the yellow has 50% chance. For the next example, they have told me that we're crossing both heterozygous red flower. So in this case again, I'm just going to quickly write down the gametes for these. So that will be capital R and a lowercase r and a capital R and a lowercase r. So we're going to be crossing both of them now. That would be a homozygous dominant, so capital R and a heterozygous now, and finally a homozygous recessive now. So we have the genotypes capital R, capital R, lowercase r, and lowercase r. So I can see the probabilities of them occurring. So I know that capital R only occurs once, so that would just be 25%. Whereas capital R, lowercase r occurs twice, so that would be 50%. And lowercase r only occurs once, so that's again 25%. So it's asked me again for the offspring phenotypes. So we have red and we have yellow again. So in this case, looking at the red, so I know that because red is dominant, it will be expressed by homozygous dominant as well as heterozygous. So I know for this that will be 75%. I'm simply adding 50% to 25%. And for the yellow, I only have 25% because it has to be homozygous recessive. So in that case, the ratios are 3 to 1 for this. Alright, so now I am looking at dihybrid crosses. So in this, we will be inheriting 2 characteristics instead of 1. So looking at an example, so peas can be round or wrinkled, and green or yellow. So in this case, our 2 characteristics is being either round or wrinkled, and the second one being the color, so either green or yellow. So I can be thinking about which letter I would be using for the alleles. So for the first one, so round or wrinkled, I can just use R, so capital R or lowercase r. And for the green and yellow, I can just use capital Y and lowercase y. So from this, I could have 4 phenotypes. So I could either be yellow and round, green and round, yellow and wrinkled, and green and wrinkled. So these are the 4 phenotypes I could have. Reading further on, it's told me that round peas are dominant over wrinkled peas. So round peas would have a capital R, whereas wrinkled peas would have a lowercase r, because wrinkled peas would be recessive. And yellow peas are dominant, so yellow peas are dominant over green peas, so yellow peas would have a capital Y, and green peas would then be lowercase y. So if I was to look at the genotypes for all of them, so for the first one being round and yellow, so they're both dominant traits. So in this case, I could have a capital R, a capital Y. So that's round and yellow, because we have a dominant in both of these. and now we could have a capital R, lowercase r, and again capital Y, capital Y. We could also have a capital R, and a uppercase Y and a lowercase y, and finally we could also have a uppercase R, lowercase r, capital Y, and lowercase y. So these are the 4 different genotypes we could have for yellow and round. Okay, so for my green and round now, so I would require my allele R to be dominant and my allele Y to be recessive. So in this case, I could have a capital R, and a lowercase y, and I could also have a capital R, lowercase r, and a lowercase y. So in this case, we only have 2 genotypes for this. So now looking at yellow and wrinkled. So in this case, our allele for R would need to be recessive, and our allele for Y would need to be dominant. So in this case, we would have a lowercase r, a capital Y. We could have a lowercase r, capital Y, and a lowercase y. And finally, for being green and wrinkled, and these are both recessive traits, so that could be only lowercase r, and lowercase y. So in this, they're asking me what would be the offspring phenotype ratio when we're crossing 2 heterozygous round, heterozygous yellow. So I know that being round and being yellow is both a dominant trait, so I need the heterozygous for both of them. So first, for the round, I know that would be capital R, lowercase r, and for the heterozygous yellow, I know that would be capital Y, lowercase y. So because we have both of them, so it would be the same repeated again. To cross them, we need to split them into their respective gametes, and from each of them we should get 4 different gametes, and each gamete should consist of 2 genes, because we have 2 characteristics in a dihybrid cross. So now what we want is 2 genes and an allele from each gene. So now what we can do is we can first get the first allele from the first gene, so that would be the capital R. Then we can get the first allele from the second gene, so that would be capital Y. Next, what we can do is again get the first allele from the first gene again, so that would be a capital R, and then the second allele from the second gene now, so that would be the lowercase y. So now we've crossed our uppercase R twice, we can move on to the lowercase r, so the second allele from the first gene, so that would be our lowercase r, and then we can again have the uppercase y, and again the lowercase r, and now the lowercase y. So these will be our 4 gametes from this, and because we have the same genotype again, so we can just repeat this. So that would be capital R and capital Y, capital R, lowercase y, lowercase r, capital Y, and finally lowercase r and lowercase y. And because they're gametes, what we tend to do is we tend to put a circle around them. So I'm just going to put a circle around all of these. So these are my gametes. So we can now just simply cross them like we have done before. So for the first one, I would end up having capital R, uppercase Y, and then capital R, just capital Y, lowercase y, and capital R, lowercase r, capital Y, and capital Y, and capital R, lowercase r, uppercase Y, and lowercase y. So now that I have done my cross, I can start to look at the phenotypes. So as previously mentioned, these are the 4 phenotypes we have. So first, looking at round and yellow, so remember we would require a dominant in both for it to be round and yellow. So I'm going to start circling every single one which has a dominant in both of the genes. So the first one does, the second one does, the third one does, and the fourth one does as well. So now I'm going to look at the second row. I'm just going to keep circling the ones where I see dominant in both. And I find that if I count them now, I will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I have 9. So now looking at my round in green. So in this case, I would have to have a capital R for dominance as it's round, and I would have to have both lowercase y because it's recessive for the color. So I'm going to circle any I see. So I can see one there. I see one is there, and finally there's one there. So I can only see 3 in this. So I'm just going to write 3 down for this ratio. My next one is yellow and wrinkled. So I would have to have both lowercase r's and an uppercase y in this case. So I'm going to be looking to circle them now. So I can see that I have one there, and finally one there. So I can again only see 3. So finally, looking at green and wrinkled, so both recessive, I know that there is only 1. So that is 1. So my ratio ends up being 9 to 3 to 3 to 1. And what you would realize is that 9 to 3 to 3 to 1 is the ratio for most of the heterozygous and dihybrid crosses that we do. Right, so now looking at codominance. So in codominance, both alleles are equally dominant and they will both be expressed in the phenotype. And how we represent codominance, so we have an allele with a subscript. So for example, let's say we were looking at the color for flowers. So if we have a black flower, we could say that the allele could be C, so C for color, and then we would have to have a subscript. So for example, for a black flower, we could say it would be C and then the subscript B. If it was white flower, we could say that it could be C and then the subscript W. Now, if we were looking at shape, for example, we could have S as the base, and we could have, for example, if we were looking at round, we could say that would be S and the subscript would be round and would be R, sorry. And if we were looking at wrinkled, it could be S and then subscript would be a W for wrinkled. So going through an example, so I've been told that in flowers, red and white show no dominance in respect to each other. And then if both red and white are in the genotype, then a pink flower will be expressed. So what I can do to show my red, I can say, because it's color, I can say it's C and R as my subscript. And for white, I can say that this would be C and the subscript would be W. Now it's told me that if both red and white are in the genotype, then a pink flower will be expressed. So what this means is that if we have CR and then if we have CW, then we would end up having a pink flower. So it's asking me what would be the offspring phenotypes if red and white flower are crossed. So for the red, it would have to be CR and CR, because if we had CR, CW, I know that that would be pink. So for the red, I would have CR, CR, and for the white, I would have CW, CW. So now I would just simply cross them like I did in a monohybrid cross. So that would just be CR, CW. And then again, I have a CR, CW, CR, CW, and CR, CW again. So in this case, I have 100% CR, CW. So therefore, it must be 100% pink in this case. So then, if I was crossing to pink flowers, so I know for pink flowers it would have to be CR, and my other gamete would be CW. So because it's 2 of them, we will be repeating that. So now we just simply cross them. So I would end up having CR, CR, and then CR, CW, then CR, CW again, and CW, and CW. So in this case, I know that I have 25% CR, CR, and 50% RCW, as there's two of them, and then for my CWCW I would have a 25% again. So CR I know that's red, so I have 25% red, and CRCW, which is pink, I know I have 50% pink, and CWCW I know is white, so I have 25% white. So if we were to have a ratio, it would be 1 and to 2 and to 1. So that would be my ratio for red to pink to white. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you did like this video, don't forget to subscribe to see more of these, and you can watch my recent videos by clicking on the links popping up. Thank you.